Have you ever looked at your savings account after months of strict budgeting, skipping vacations, and passing up on new gadgets, only to feel completely underwhelmed? It's that strange, discouraging phase early in your financial life, a period where effort feels totally disconnected from outcome. You are setting aside money, you're resisting impulses, you're tracking every dime. You are disciplined. Yet, after a full year, the total amount saved feels almost insulting compared to the massive effort it took to accumulate it. This is where the damage is done. This disconnect creates a quiet, dangerous psychological friction. It's a silent killer of wealth because it often leads people to abandon the entire process before it even has a chance to work. What makes this experience so powerful is that it doesn't feel like a failure of discipline. It feels like a failure of the system itself. You begin to question whether saving is even worth the sacrifice. You look around and see everyone else enjoying visible lifestyles, new phones, short vacations, an upgraded apartment. Those things consume an amount equivalent to months of your hard-earned savings. In that moment, the immediate satisfaction of consumption begins to feel more rational than the delayed and seemingly insignificant reward of accumulation. Over time, this isn't a conscious decision you make. It's a subtle shift in perception, reshaped by repeated emotional reinforcement. You're not being impatient, you're reacting to what your senses are telling you, that saving is a dead end. But here is the foundational truth they don't teach you in school. The core of this phenomenon lies in the mathematical structure of compounding. We all want that exponential growth curve, but compounding does not behave in an intuitive, linear way. In the early stages, phase 1, your growth is not driven by returns. It is almost entirely driven by your contributions. Let's look at the numbers. If you save $10,000, even a decent 5% return produces only $500 in a year. That $500 feels utterly insignificant relative to your everyday expenses. It barely covers a weekend trip. Because of this, the system appears inactive. The money looks like it's just sitting there, doing nothing. This creates a powerful illusion that saving is merely storing cash rather than building an empire. However, the geometric structure begins to fundamentally change once the base becomes large enough for returns to actually matter. This is the tipping point. Look at the shift. At $100,000, that same 5% generates $5,000 annually. Suddenly, that isn't a negligible increment. It begins to resemble a meaningful financial event. You start to feel it. Now, fast forward. At $500,000, that same 5% produces $25,000. That is an amount that can cover significant portions of your living costs without you lifting a finger. The dynamic shift is continuous in mathematics, but in perception, it feels sudden. It feels as if the system has suddenly activated, even though it has been operating with the exact same math the entire time you were struggling. And this, right here, is where the psychological trap emerges. Most people only experience phase 1. They experience the high effort and the low visible results. They feel the pain of saving without the pleasure of watching the money grow, and they exit the system long before they reach the threshold where compounding becomes perceptible. The wealth-building system rewards persistence, but it does so in a cruel way. It hides its rewards until the later stages. This severe asymmetry between input and feedback creates a natural selection process. The system filters out those who need instant gratification and only retains those who can tolerate delayed validation long enough to benefit. The situation becomes even more complex when we consider the critical role of time. Time is not simply a passive backdrop in financial growth. It is the primary multiplier. It amplifies both your contributions and your returns. Missing those early years of saving does not just reduce your final outcome slightly, it can alter it dramatically. Why? Because those very first contributions are the ones that must compound the longest. This creates a second layer of invisibility. The extreme importance of early action is not felt when it matters most. By the time the importance is realized, the early years are gone, and they can no longer be replicated. You can't get that time back. This isn't a modern phenomenon. Historically, this pattern has appeared across different economic systems and eras. It's structural. Whether you look at long-term equity markets, land ownership, or even early-stage business investments, the story is always the same. An initial period characterized by slow, uncertain progress, where you feel like you're fighting for every inch. This is followed by a phase where growth accelerates in a way that appears completely disproportionate to your recent effort. This pattern is a fundamental, structural feature of any system that relies on accumulation and reinvestment. It is non-negotiable. From a behavioral perspective, we must admit that humans are simply not naturally aligned with this structure. Our perception is finely tuned to linear relationships. If I put in 10 hours of work, I expect 10 hours of pay. We expect immediate and proportional results. But when we face exponential systems, we are blind. We tend to drastically underestimate future outcomes and drastically overvalue present consumption. This direct mismatch between cognitive bias and mathematical reality explains why the early stage of saving feels so unrewarding. It's why so many people default to choices that provide immediate feedback instead. Your brain is trying to protect you from what it perceives as wasted effort. There is also a powerful identity component embedded within this process that no one talks about. During phase 1, a person saving consistently does not yet feel wealthy. You may not even feel financially secure. The behaviors required to build wealth, the frugality, the discipline, the strategic thinking, exist long before the identity of being a wealthy person typically accompanies it. This creates a brutal period of dissonance. Your actions and your self-perception are not aligned. You are living like a miser, but you aren't rich yet. This misalignment makes the whole process feel unstable, uncertain, and deeply uncomfortable. You feel like an imposter in your own financial life. However, as the system progresses and the base grows, this identity begins to shift. Eventually, you are no longer relying solely on earned income from your labor. You begin to experience the effects of accumulated capital. Suddenly, your financial decisions become less reactive and more strategic. This isn't because of a sudden change in your knowledge, it's because the underlying structure of your life has changed. The same behaviors that once felt significant now produce massive, visible outcomes. This reinforces the process rather than undermining it. You finally feel like an investor, not just someone who denies themselves pleasures. What appears from the outside as a sudden transition into financial stability is almost always the result of a very long period of invisible accumulation. The early phase, where saving feels slow and unrewarding, is not a sign that the system is ineffective. It is rather an inherent, unchangeable feature of how the system works. The challenge isn't in understanding the mathematics. A fifth grader can do the math. The challenge is enduring the period where the mathematics has not yet become visible to the naked eye. In this sense, saving does not feel pointless because it is ineffective. It feels pointless because it is operating on a timeline that does not match human intuition. The system is not broken, but it is fundamentally misaligned with how we naturally evaluate progress. Recognizing this misalignment does not eliminate the difficulty. It doesn't make phase 1 feel good, but it reframes the experience. It turns what feels like stagnation into an expected phase within a much larger structure. Over time, your perception must shift. You stop seeing saving as a static act and understand it as a dynamic system that evolves with scale. Think of it in 3 phases. The early stage is dominated by discipline, the middle stage by momentum, and the later stage by leverage. Each phase feels fundamentally different. They require different mindsets, yet they are all governed by the exact same underlying principles. The only difference lies in when the system becomes visible. And for most people, that visibility arrives much later than they expect. When viewed through this lens, the question is no longer why saving feels pointless at first. The real question is, why did we ever expect it to feel meaningful immediately? The answer lies not in the numbers themselves, but in the way human perception interacts with time, growth, and delayed feedback. The game isn't about the money. It's about enduring the time it takes for the math to show up.